yes, it's Charley Danger, private detective. Charley Danger, defender of the Constitution. And now, Charley Danger, private detective.
Get this and get it straight. Crime is a sucker's road, and those who travel it today wind up in the gutter, the prison, or the grave. They never learn. For a private dick like me, the job usually spells danger. But then again, that's my name. When I opened my eyes, I didn't know where I was. It took a minute for me to realize that I was lying in my bed in my room at the Motel 6. A moment ago, I had been sitting in the Denny's with Holmes and Jane. I'd been wondering where the hell the waitress was with that cheeseburger and fries. I sat up in bed. I looked over at Holmes's sleeping form in his bed not 6 feet away. I knew that Jane was sleeping in the room directly next to ours. The clock on the nightstand revealed that it was 4 in the morning. I reached for my lucky strikes and lit one up. I knew I wouldn't be able to fall back asleep. So, after quietly donning my Percy Kilbride as Pa Kettle disguise, I quietly slipped out of the room and made my way across the parking lot to Denny's for a cup of joe. The joint was empty except for some guy and an old dame in a booth. The waitress and the cook were busy yapping on their cell phones, and I recall wondering who they could be talking to at 4:30 in the morning. The old dame in the booth was checking me out. Boy, she sure looked like she'd been through the ringer. Next thing I knew, she was waving at me. Suddenly I realized that it was Jane in her Marjorie Main as Ma Kettle disguise. The guy with her turned around to look at me, and I could see it was Gene Simmons, the guy with the tongue from Kiss. I knew, in reality, it was none other than Shurelock Homes. I slid into the booth next to Jane.
What's the matter, big boy? Did you have a bad dream?
I just can't seem to sleep, baby, I said as I reached for my smokes. I struck a match and puffed my cigarette to life. I got tired of laying there counting sheep and decided to come over here for some joe. Besides, who can sleep when we know the feds are closing in on us?
Sleep has also eluded both Miss Cannery and myself,
replied Holmes.
We therefore gravitated to this establishment where we have been discussing our dire predicament for some time now.
It looks like we're in one hell of a mess. I motioned to the waitress. The girl was just a young kid and would have been cute except for the silver rings in her nose and lower lip. The tattoos on her arms didn't help either.
You guys gonna order anything besides coffee or what?
You must be psychic, baby. Do you read palms, too? Jane poked me in the ribs with her elbow, and I snapped into character.
Now, come to think of it, I always say that a cup of coffee is just what a feller needs when he's got a heap of things on his mind to think about. Ain't that right, Ma?
You're right as rain, Pa.
Ma Kettle replied.
Let's just say we get us another pot or two and see how it goes from there.
The girl was staring at Holmes.
You can bring along a pot for him, too, and make it snappy.
The girl scribbled something down on her pad, shook her head, and walked off. Holmes looked up from the newspaper in which he'd been so engrossed. Suddenly it dawned on me that something was terribly wrong. How could I have just left Holmes asleep in his bed in our motel room, and yet come to find him seated here in Denny's before me? There could be only one answer.
There's somebody sleeping in your bed,
I said to Holmes.
Excuse me? How long would you say it takes you to put all of that makeup on your face?
Holmes raised an eyebrow.
In its entirety, about 20 minutes. Why is it that you ask? When I left our room only minutes ago, there was somebody sleeping in your bed. I heard them snoring, and I thought it was you. Mr. Danger, I assure you that I do not snore.
Flinging the newspaper aside, he leapt from the booth.
Follow me! There's not a moment to lose!
He dashed from the restaurant and across the parking lot. Jane and I ran after him, leaving the waitress standing there with 3 piping hot pots of fresh Maxwell House. As we caught up to him, Holmes skidded to a stop just outside the door to our room, and he held up a hand in caution. There was a dog, a great big collie. She was barking at the door to our room.
Why, it appears to be none other than Lassie,
exclaimed Holmes.
She's obviously trying to tell us something.
What is it, girl?
Said Jane.
Oh, Charlie, be careful.
I pulled out my trusty .38 caliber snub-nosed heater, and I stepped forward. With one swift kick, the door flew open, and I charged inside with Jane and her Thompson right behind me. There was somebody in Holmes's bed, all right, but the bedclothes concealed their identity. With our weapons trained on the unknown intruder, we cautiously approached the bed. Holmes reached out and yanked back the covers. Our jaws all dropped in shock and disbelief. The sleeping intruder turned out to be none other than Congressman Ron Paul of Texas, known as the defender of the Constitution and the only man in Washington that can actually be trusted. He had been severely beaten, tased multiple times, waterboarded, and bound in a straitjacket. I hurried to free him from his bonds.
They threatened my life. They're afraid of my popularity and credibility. They're afraid I'll run again.
Who did this to you?
Inquired Holmes.
It was Obama and Geithner and Bernanke. They said if I don't denounce the Constitution and jump on the global governance bandwagon, they'll start arresting my supporters as potential domestic terrorist threats.
Yes, but why leave you here in this hotel room?
Asked Jane as she stuffed her Thompson back into her purse.
Because they're onto your game. They want me to deliver this letter.
Holmes snatched the envelope from Ron Paul's shaking hand and opened it.
Dear Mr. Danger and Sherlock Holmes,
He read.
You are both way out of your league in this matter. We make progress towards world government every day. Our police state control grid is nearly in place. We control government, energy, financial systems, and the media. We control everything that you see and hear. We control the vertical. We control the horizontal. We can soften the news so that everything is blurred and completely out of focus, though we never, ever sharpen it to crystal clarity. Sit back and let us control every aspect of life for the unwashed masses, because resistance is futile. We are as inevitable as death, which we shall gladly bestow upon you, should you persist in opposing us.
Well, that was quite a mouthful, wasn't it?
What I find singularly interesting is the signature at the very end of this message. It was signed by none other than Professor Mariachi himself.
What do you make of it, Holmes?
It is a threat not only directed at us, but a threat meant for the entire world. There is only one way to address such a threat, and that is with concentrated effort and direct opposition. We must act quickly. There is very little time to lose.
Holmes jumped up and made a beeline for the door.
To the Winnebago! The game is afoot!
You want to come with us, girl?
Lassie wagged her tail.
Personal notice. Danger is my stock and trade. If life's tossing you curves you can't handle, then you got a job for me, Charley Danger. So reads an ad of mine in the phone book. Ordinarily, I'm a regular kind of guy, out to make a living just like anyone else, except that I pack heat and ask a lot of questions. Those are two great big no-nos in the world of the powered elite. The people I was up against weren't your common everyday crooks, liars, and killers. They were super crooks and super liars and super killers. They had just pulled off the biggest financial heist in the history of mankind, and they had broken every single law in the book. It had taken my brain a while for that to sink in, so to speak, but I finally got it. The bastards were robbing every single one of us. Every man, woman, and child born and living in the United States was being robbed blind and raked over the coals. They were sitting there on their duffs and taking it, too. They were taking it because they were being continually fed a daily diet of lies and deceit. Taking it because they didn't know where to find the truth, and because the truth, when you can find it, is pretty hard to take. However, I'd managed to get involved in this mess. Involved in it I was, and I'd see it through to the end. As we grabbed up Ron Paul and our belongings and headed for the Winnebago, I hoped that all of our gallant efforts wouldn't turn out to be a case of too little, too late. Once inside the Winnebago, we started putting our heads together on where we stood and what we were going to do about it. I'm willing to bet they know where we are. I say we should blow this joint now. Oh, very well. Give it here. No, I mean we should leave this place now, I said as I climbed into the driver's seat. Perhaps we should take a moment to examine this. The paper waving aloft in Shurelock Holmes's hand was unmistakably a map of some kind. It was in the envelope with the letter, he said as he handed it to me. Do you notice anything unusual about it?
It's a map of North America.
And?
And there are no northern or southern borders.
Precisely. It is indeed a map of the North American Union.
The Constitutional Restoration Army has been aware of the plans for some time now.
said Jane.
But the government and the media deny that the plans exist.
Actually, it all began with NAFTA under Clinton.
Ron Paul added.
It accelerated under the Security and Prosperity Partnership signed by Bush and continued under Obama.
The congressman went on.
It's pushed by the Rockefeller Foundation, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, and the unions, big business, and a host of public-private partnerships.
He said.
Ultimately, they would integrate the cultures, the economies, the living standards, the military defense, all the laws and governments. The United States as we know it would cease to exist.
And this is being done without the knowledge and consent of the American people?
I asked in astonishment.
How could they get away with that? Elementary, my dear Danger. Why does the government refuse to secure the borders? Why do they want to legalize 30 million illegal aliens and open up the floodgates for millions more? The answer is obvious. So what does all this have to do with us? We're already in crapola up to our necks. What gives?
Holmes pointed to the state of Arizona on the map.
What do you see there?
Somebody drew an X and scribbled a phone number.
Precisely. And that, dear girl, is where the investigation leads.
But we just came all the way from California. Are you suggesting that we now drive all the way back to Arizona?
Precisely. You see, I'm convinced that Mariachi is deeply involved in the North American Union plot.
The dog is right. We have no other choice.
Lassie's ears perked up and her tail started wagging. As the four of us continued to direct our concentration on the map and our predicament, Lassie began jumping up and down. She spun around several times and then stood upon her hind legs. She was waving her forepaws in the air and barking loudly.
I think she's trying to tell us something.
We turned around and stared through the windshield in shock at the scene that was taking place before us. The place was crawling with feds. Lights were flashing everywhere. Helicopters hovered over the motel. There were police cars, armored vehicles, troop carriers, a tank, an ambulance, a fire truck. There were cops, detectives, CIA agents, state troopers, SWAT teams, and Navy SEALs. They were all fully armed and moving into position. Paratroopers drifted down from the sky to join them. Every eye, every gun was pointed at the 2 rooms that had previously been ours. Suddenly, a voice blared through a loudspeaker.
This is the police. We know you're in there. You are surrounded. Charley, Danger, Shurelock Homes, Jane, Cannery, come out. Oh, yes, and Lassie, too. Come out with your hands up.
There we were, at the other end of the parking lot. We had the best seats in the house as we watched the entire production unfold. Holmes tapped me on the shoulder.
Might I suggest that we attempt to sneak out of here as quietly and with as much stealth as possible?
You could feel the tension in the air as the moments ticked by with no response from either room. The feds were gnawing at their bits, just raring to be let loose to attack. They were preparing to shoot tear gas bombs into the rooms through the windows.
You have 2 minutes to comply. I repeat, you have 2 minutes to comply, or else we're coming in there.
Jane looked over at Holmes.
I think you're right. Let's get out of here.
I was just about to fire up the engine when a loud, insistent banging on the camper door spooked us all. Ron Paul hit the floor. In an instant, my trusty heater was pointed at the door, and so was Jane's Thompson.
See who it is.
I said to Holmes. Reluctantly, he approached the door, opened it, and slowly stuck his head out. It was 2 National Guardsmen in full battle gear.
Gene Simmons!
Exclaimed one of them.
Hey, Joe! It's Gene Simmons from KISS! Gosh, it's really him, isn't it?
Apparently.
Replied Holmes.
What is it that I can do for you men? Is there some kind of trouble?
Well, I'm awfully sorry, but you're gonna have to move your bus from the area, Mr. Simmons.
Said the first one.
If bullets start flying, it could get real dangerous around here. Wow! I don't believe it!
Relief flooded over all of us.
I'll be sure to do so immediately.
Holmes replied.
Is there anything else?
The young man seemed hesitant.
Just one more thing, sir.
Yes?
The young man held out an ink pen.
Could I get your autograph? Me too! Me too!
This is the Situation Room, and I'm Wolf Blitzer with a CNN News Alert. We're just getting information and pictures coming in of what appears to be a deadly terrorist attack in our nation's capital. This is what we know so far. Homeland Security forces, acting on top-secret information, had cornered dangerous domestic terrorists Charley Danger, Shurelock Homes, Jane Cannery, and Lassie in a local Motel 6, where they were registered as Ma and Pa Kettle and Gene Simmons from the rock band KISS. Apparently, special forces, SWAT teams, and terrorist response teams were called in, and the building was surrounded.
This is the police. We know you're in there. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands up.
When the security forces moved in on the terrorists, the entire building exploded.
We're coming in I repeat, we're coming in there.
At this point, we don't know for sure, but authorities suspect that this was a deliberate terrorist bombing plot to draw in and kill as many Homeland Security personnel as possible. It is not known as yet if this was indeed a suicide bombing, or if the deadly domestic terrorist somehow escaped before the explosion. We will continue with more scenes of mayhem and bedlam, as well as reports and information as fed to us from official sources and authorities in our nation's capital, right after this important word from our sponsors.
Men, are you not feeling as spry as you used to? Are you having a hard time getting it up when the time is right? Well, then ask your doctor if new hard-on is right for you.
Yes, you've been listening to Charley Danger, Private Detective. Tune in next time for the next exciting episode of Charley Danger, Private Detective.